Hello and welcome to Biology 112 at Cascade campus. This video was originally recorded for Rock Creek, but we don't have access to the lab right now, so I'm going to dub over this video to make it applicable to us. Luckily, the Rock Creek labs and the Cascade labs look pretty similar. For many of you, this would have been your first lab class, or maybe your first lab class in a while. So I'm going to give you an overview of lab safety, but I also want to give you a little bit of an idea of what it would feel like to be in a biology lab at Portland Community College so that you feel prepared to take your classes next quarter. Before you come to lab, please read through the instructions in the lab manual. You may be asked to complete a pre-lab assignment to show that you have read and understand the instructions. Your instructor may ask you to complete a post-lab exercise. When you come to lab, you want to make sure that you're not wearing any clothing that's baggy or might dangle into your experiment. You also want to remove any dangly jewelry such as necklaces or bracelets, and if you have long hair, you'll want to tie it back. That helps keep you and your personal belongings clean. Please also make sure to wear closed-toed shoes. Sandals are not allowed in the laboratory. That keeps you from dropping anything on your feet. Eating, drinking, chewing gum, and using tobacco products are not allowed in lab. There's a shelf just outside of the lab door where you can leave your open food and beverage containers during lab. That helps prevent you from ingesting anything you shouldn't. So now that you're wearing the appropriate clothing and you've left your food and drinks outside, you're going to walk in the lab door. Just inside the lab, you'll see cubbies. Please leave your personal belongings such as backpacks or jackets inside the cubbies. This not only helps keep your lab bench clear, it also helps keep your belongings clean. Please do not use any personal electronic devices such as cell phones, tablets, or laptops in lab. Again, this is to keep your devices clean. The laboratory that we use for Biology 112 at the Cascade campus has 6 lab tables with 4 seats at each table. Once you've put your stuff away, you'll go find your lab table. There's a bottle of disinfectant on each lab table. You'll want to spray down that countertop and wipe it with a paper towel. That helps clean up anything that might have been left by the previous lab. Once everyone is seated at their lab table, the instructor will introduce the day's lab. Often in our classes, we start with a quiz that covers material from the previous week's lab. Then the instructor may give you background information that helps you understand the concepts of the lab. Your instructor may also go over any procedures that you'll be using in lab that day. Once the instructor has introduced the lab, you can gather the materials. Often there will be a tray of materials for your entire lab table that's already been prepared for you by our wonderful lab support team. One person from your group should go get the tray and bring it over to your lab bench. You and your lab group will follow the steps in the lab manual to complete the experiment. Your instructor will be there to help you if you have any questions. In Biology 112, our labs are often formatted to have 2 parts. In the first parts, the lab manual will give you instructions for an experiment that's already been designed for you. For example, you may mix yeast with different concentrations of sugar to see how much gas they produce. In the second part of the experiment, you will often be given the opportunity to design your own lab procedure. For example, you may have the chance to choose between changing the pH that yeast are grown in, changing the temperature that they're grown in, or changing which sugar they're fed. Depending on the lab, you may be required to wear personal protective equipment. For Biology 112, this means goggles and/or gloves. The lab has goggles that you can use, but you're also welcome to buy your own if you don't like the idea of sharing. It is important that you do wear the personal protective equipment that is indicated by the lab manual or your instructor. This will protect your eyes and your skin from any reagents or microorganisms that you may be using in lab. Gloves can also keep skin cells from contaminating your experiments. If you are pregnant or have any medical conditions that might require precautions in lab, please let your instructor know at the start of class. This includes if you're immunocompromised or if you're allergic to chemicals that we might use in lab. Now I'm going to go over some habits that it's really good to get into at the start of your lab career. One really important habit to get into in the lab is reading the labels of any materials that you use. This prevents you from mixing up reagents and using the wrong material. If a material is hazardous, this should be clearly indicated on the label. The reagent that you see here is labeled as 30% sucrose. That tells us what concentration of sucrose or table sugar is dissolved in water. We often refer to the chemicals that we use in lab as reagents. Often, a bottle of reagent is shared by the whole class. The skinny tube to the right of the bottle is called a pipette, and it's used to distribute certain volumes of the reagent. Often, we will label a pipette with tape so you know what reagent it's for. Reading the label on both the pipette and the bottle helps ensure that you don't cross-contaminate reagents. Not only should you read the labels that you see in lab, you should also make sure to label everything. For example, before you use any test tubes, you want to make sure to label them clearly so that you don't get your samples mixed up. It's also really important that you establish good communication with the other members of your group. If you're generally more reserved in a group setting, please make sure that you speak up so your voice is heard. If you're generally more outgoing, please make sure that you give each of your lab mates a chance to contribute. Good communication can help promote safety. For example, if you were to light a Bunsen burner, you would want to let your lab mates know. It can also help ensure that you get good experimental results. Once you have completed the lab, you'll want to make sure to clean any equipment that you used. There are several sinks in the room and a couple of drying racks. If you use any lab glass, such as beakers, please make sure to wash them thoroughly and leave them on the drying racks. We'll talk more about microscope care and use later on, but just be aware that keeping your microscope clean and well maintained is really important. Your lab manual and your instructor will give you clear instructions on how to dispose of waste. If you're not sure about how to dispose of something, make sure to ask your instructor. Some items can be thrown in a regular trash can. Some items can be recycled. Broken glass should be disposed of in the broken glass disposal container. These are made out of cardboard and are about the size of a trash can. This helps protect people who are disposing of the waste from getting cut. If you use any disposable glassware, such as these pipettes, they can also be disposed of in the broken glass container. If you use any materials, such as blood, that might be considered biohazards, please dispose of them in the biohazard waste container. We may also have a beaker of diluted bleach on the counter, where we will ask you to dispose of materials such as slides that you've made from your own cheek cells. Some reagents, such as the 30% sucrose we saw earlier, can be safely poured down the sink. Sucrose is just sugar. Other reagents need to be disposed of in a special way so that they don't contaminate the water supply. Your instructor may direct you to pour out these reagents into designated waste containers. Please return any materials that you use to the place that you found them. Any materials that came from the tray at the start of class should be returned to the tray, and the tray should be placed back on the counter. In many of our courses, we use slides that are neatly organized in labeled slide boxes. If you've used any of these slides, please return them to the appropriate place so that the next person who needs one can find it. The labs at Portland Community College include a number of common safety features that you can also expect to see in any other lab you may work in. In this image, you can see an emergency shower above an eye wash on the left, a fire blanket above a fire extinguisher, and a small white first aid kit mounted to the right side of the pillar. If there's an accident in lab that requires first aid, for example, if someone cuts their finger on a piece of broken glass, please alert the instructor right away, and they will help you take care of it. If the first aid kit is low on supplies, please also let your instructor know so that they can have it replenished. Your instructor will show you the locations of the emergency gas shutoff buttons that are located in the lab room. If you smell gas, please hit one of those buttons to turn off the gas supply. Usually the gas supply to our lab classroom is turned off anyway. Some of the more hazardous reagents, such as strong acids or bases, may need to be cleaned up using a spill control kit. For example, the spill control kit contains agents that would neutralize an acid or a base, making the spill safer to clean up. If you spill one of these reagents, please contact your instructor. If you get a hazardous reagent in your eyes, you'll want to use the emergency eye wash station. The green plastic caps you can see in the picture cover spouts that act kind of like drinking fountains. They would squirt water up at your eyes to clean the chemicals out of them. On the right-hand side of the image, you can see a green paddle that you would push to turn the eye wash on. You'll need to keep your eyes in the water for 15 minutes. It can be hard to keep your eyes open this long, so you may want to ask a lab mate to help hold your eyelids open with their fingers. If you spill a hazardous reagent on your body or clothes, please use the emergency shower by pulling down on the handle. Don't worry about water getting on the lab floor. Take off any clothing that was in contact with the chemicals. If you're in the lab room while someone else is using the emergency shower, you may want to turn away or leave the room to give them privacy. We don't use fire in our labs, so the probability of a fire is low. But if someone's hair or clothing does catch on fire, remove the fire blanket from its box and throw it on the person to smother the flames. You're also welcome to use the fire extinguisher. If there's a fire that can't be put out, pull the fire alarm. There's a phone in each lab classroom. If there's an emergency, dial 4444 to reach Campus Safety's emergency line. You can also call 911. Campus Safety may be closer by and may be able to reach you more quickly. They can also call 911 for you. If you're calling from a different phone, you can reach Campus Safety's emergency line at 971-722-4444 or their non-emergency line at 971-722-4902. Portland Community College has also established procedures that you should follow in the case of an emergency, such as a fire, an earthquake, or a lockdown, as in the case of an active shooter. A Portland Community College emergency guide will be mounted on the wall in the lab. In the case of a fire, please evacuate the building as quickly and calmly as possible. Your instructor will notify you of the location of the nearest safe assembly area at the beginning of your first class. Please remain at the safe assembly area until you have been instructed that it's safe to return to the building. In the case of an earthquake, please duck and cover. A great place to do this is underneath your lab bench. In an active shooter situation, your best option is to escape. If that's not a possibility and the building has gone into lockdown, please lock and close the doors to lab and find a good place to hide. You may want to hide under your lab bench. There's also a lab preparation room connected to each lab classroom that doesn't have any windows and also makes a safe hiding spot. You should avoid fighting an active shooter unless it's your only option. In the case of a pandemic, please remain at home for the entire quarter. Your lab instructors are working hard to figure out how to teach this course online. We want to make sure that you get the most complete lab experience that we can give you. I hope that this video has given you a sense of what to expect when you return to campus to take lab courses in the future. Lab courses don't just teach you how to use lab equipment. They teach you how to think like a scientist, which is just as important. In this virtual version of Biology 112, we will help you develop the critical thinking and lab skills you need to be prepared for your future lab classes. It's going to be a unique challenge, and we're all going to have to be patient and work together, but I'm confident that this quarter will be a success. Thank you for signing up for Biology 112. We're all looking forward to working with you.